Welcome to the On the Edge podcast.
There are some very interesting conversations that I would like to have about race, but I feel like you can't. There's not even a place to jump off without just being called a racist, and who wants to deal with that? So it's like, well, then the conversations don't get had. You know, I was having a conversation with one of the realtors I work with. One of my favorite people to work with. She happens to be black. And we were having a conversation about why some of her clients who are also black have a harder time getting mortgages than maybe some of her clients who are white. And, you know, I took that very seriously. One, because that's part of my profession. Two, I value this lady and her friendship and her business relationship very deeply. So I want to make sure that I'm never contributing anything that could create or reinforce that stereotype. And so I went back and I looked at, you know, the last 5 of her borrowers who I happen to know were black, and 5 of her borrowers who I happen to know were white, and a bunch of them I had no clue because I very, very rarely meet clients in person. So unless they mention that or she mentions it or we do a Zoom conference, I would have no idea. And what I noticed is that amongst the black borrowers who at this point in their financial profile of going to buy a house are saying the same things, earning the same kind of money, have the same kind of savings as the white borrowers, I would not have anecdotally or without the analytics, I would have anecdotally never thought anything different about the two groups. But when I went back and looked at it, and this is a very small sample size, so this is obviously not, you know, systematic of all lending, I noticed that the black borrowers I were talking to, they had a lower credit score because of something that had happened in their past, you know, 5-10 years ago before they got serious about their finances and wanting to become a homeowner. And I don't know the answer to this question. I don't know if it's systematic racism. I don't know if it's a cultural thing. I don't know if there is something in the credit algorithm that negatively affects black people. I don't know. I would like to have that discussion with people that are smarter than me and might be in the know. But I just feel like you can't have that conversation without me being called a racist or somebody coming from it from a disingenuous, like, oh, all financial systems are racist. And I'm like, well, I don't think that's true because I want to fund a loan for anybody because it means money in my pocket. I don't care if they're black, white, purple, female, gay, straight. And I don't even know how to start bridging that gap or that conversation with the right people to be like, hey, we do have a problem if systematically blacks have lower credit scores than Latinos or whites or Asians or whatever the case may be. But how do we fix the root problem without just calling every lender a racist? Because that sure doesn't seem productive to me. And I don't even know where to jump off. You know?
Yeah, I think the answer a lot of people want to say is if there is a racially disparate outcome like a credit score, then you want to de-emphasize the credit score. And I just think that's like, you know, it's like prescribing aspirin for a brain tumor. You know, you want to get to the root problem. You don't want to just treat some of the symptoms. And I don't know, I also don't know what the root issue there would be. I also don't even know that, like, you know, going back to Thomas Sowell again, it's the weird thing would be for all ethnicities, all races, all backgrounds to be in the exact same position. One thing I remember reading from him, I don't know if this is true anymore, but this is one of his essays from the 90s. And I think it was in his collection of essays called Barbarians at the Gates. But Thomas Sowell talks about donut shops in California. And it was something like 85 or 90% of donut shops were owned by Cambodians, who are, I think, were less than 1% of the population. But some were right around there. And what is that? Is that discrimination against non-Cambodians in the pastry industry? Like, we'd never even think to go there. It would just be, oh yeah, like, you know, Cambodians have a lot of donut shops. I don't understand why that's racist or why that would require some sort of like, congressional hearing to figure out why the donut industry in California is so dominated by Cambodians.
Yeah, I think the housing is different. I read a great book that was very eye-opening called The Color of Law. It was referred to me by a friend.
Redlining.
Yeah, referred to me by a friend of mine, Nick Goucher, who's a lender and doing a lot of great work in the Black community to promote home ownership. That's his life's goal. And man, that book is very eye-opening about how it's very easy to go back to the Jim Crow era laws and be like, well, generationally, if you get locked out of housing, especially in California, from the 50s to the 80s, fuck, dude, your family lost out on hundreds of thousands of dollars of wealth accumulation that then turns into a refinance that allows, the next generation to go to college, which then allows the upward mobility. So it's very eye-opening and something that needs to be understood. I don't claim to have any knowledge about how to address the problem. But what I can't figure out is the correlation between that and somebody in 2013 of any particular ethnic group making poor credit decisions. I don't know what the through line is. Like, I'm not smart enough. I'm not, I don't have a background in sociology or economics to figure out that through line. I think there is a through line, that if you couldn't buy housing in the 50s and then you didn't have the upward mobility in the 60s, 70s, 80s, maybe those people's children in the 90s and the 2000s have a different understanding of finance. So there is some through line that I can't see. I just don't know how to talk about it. And even talking about it right now on this podcast is making my stomach queasy because I'm like, I don't want to come across the wrong way as two white guys sitting here that I'm insensitive to it. I don't know how to fix it.
Right. So, if somebody doesn't want to read two white guys talking about it, I'd recommend reading Coleman Hughes, who talks a lot about Black consumption. He has some really good articles, long essays and articles that go into some of this stuff. But I think there's a lot of through lines. And I think that really in everybody's scared to talk about these subjects. But this is where I lean back on libertarianism, is that I think this is why it's so important to look at people as individuals, because, we look at people based on their melanin and you get one story. And you can say that there's these certain through lines with the Black community from redlining, from whatever, but it doesn't explain the other through lines that you have of Nigerian immigrants, Jamaican immigrants, of people who have the same level of quote unquote Blackness, who look the same to most non-Black Americans. And why is it that the Jamaican and Nigerian and Kenyan immigrants do so well? There's something that needs to be explored there, and I don't pretend like I have all the answers, and I don't pretend like the answer isn't that people who have been here for many, many generations were subjected to horrible racism and to an obliteration of their culture. Because I think those kind of things are super important. I mean, what you have is, and I don't know that this is the answer, but maybe it is. You have people from Jamaica and Nigeria who are coming over here with an intact culture that's developed over thousands and thousands of years. And you look at that through the evolutionary lens, and those people are coming over here with that certain evolutionary skill set, where had, I think both with Blacks and with Native Americans here, you had an intentional obliteration of their culture.
Which is like the most violent thing you can do to somebody.
Yeah. The most violent thing you can do to somebody, and also to their future generations, where you're just, I mean, you think of how long it takes for evolution to build up into something that is fit for its environment. And what you're doing, what we did here with Blacks who came from a bunch of different areas of Africa with different cultures, different tribes, different everything. And we intentionally obliterated that. We did the same thing with the Native Americans. You know, we threw them all together, not even based on tribe, somewhat, but mostly just throwing them onto reservations willy-nilly, combining tribes, and also putting a huge emphasis on kind of a detribalization where we, you know, gave a lot of incentives for Native Americans to abandon their heritage and to instead adopt a more Anglo-Saxon heritage. And when there's that level of intentional obliteration of culture, I don't think it's surprising that there's going to be some negative effects of that.